Hello, this is Robert Rickover at Body Learning, and today my guest is Melody Shaper, who is an Alexander Technique teacher in the Philadelphia area. She's just north of Philadelphia, Valley Forge vicinity. She's been an Alexander Technique teacher for about 20 years. She also has a very long-standing interest in movement in general. She's a certified Laban movement analyst, and more recently, she's become a certified Gestalt practitioner. And we're going to talk today about how the Alexander technique informs her work with these other processes. Melody, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Robert.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. I wonder if you could begin by giving our listeners a very short description or definition of the Alexander technique.
Sure. I think the Alexander technique is a very simple and yet profound path to presence. And out of that presence, anyone can become aware of themselves in the moment and have access to their authenticity, to their truth, to their needs, to what is getting in the way of them achieving their goals.
Mm-hmm. And how about Laban movement analysis? What
Sure.
would be a short description of that?
Laban movement analysis is an incredibly detailed system. It's a four-part system that teaches a very detailed somatic and linguistic analysis of all human movement. It's a remarkable system to be able to describe and define and embody all human movement.
And it comes out of the dance world, doesn't it?
Yes, Rudolf Laban was a dancer and an actor. Yep.
And then finally, Gestalt therapy. That's a type of psychoanalysis. What is it that distinguishes that particular type of psychoanalysis or psychotherapy? I think we should say.
Yeah, what I'm drawn to in it and what I love is it is very embodied. Mm-hmm. It is a type of psychotherapy where the client, just like in the Alexander work, is the one who is in charge of their work. And they're asked continually to feel and notice and understand what's going on. It's really not a talk therapy. It can be a very movement-oriented therapy. I use, touch through it.
And would you say it's a more interactive type of psychotherapy than some others?
Oh, it's definitely. And what it does is it helps someone be present in the here and now so that they can make greater, deeper contact with themselves and others. So it isn't really so much a therapy where you think and talk and go into your head so much. It's really about being in the moment, being present.
Which, of course, is also the Alexander technique, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you work with all three of these methods, and I think our listeners would be interested to know how the Alexander part of that trio informs the other two and informs basically how you work with people and how you apply those other two methods.
Yeah. The Alexander technique has enabled me to work with, really anyone, anything that comes my way. I have a facility now because of the Alexander work to meet another person and their issues with clarity, appropriate boundaries, taking care of myself, with the ability to take care of myself and to see the other person objectively. It's been incredibly helpful for me to make contact with another person and be very clear in myself. And so it informs my work with Gestalt, where I'm working and talking with someone and helping them to go through a process or an issue in their lives. And it enables me to keep going back to myself and paying attention to how I am with myself, which then allows me to be much clearer with the person that I'm working with.
So when you say the Alexander technique helps you to see other people more clearly, are you referring to, for example, physical manifestations and how they move, their bearing, that sort of thing?
Yes, yeah, I mean that. And then I also mean, we have to keep, especially in Gestalt work, all of these modalities, there has to be a certain amount of, as much as is possible, objectivity. And I'm very empathic, very heart-centered, and I can be taken right into someone's drama or story or anything that comes up. And so the Alexander work has helped me to step back in a way, maybe psychically or personally, and yet ironically be even closer with the person. So I take care of myself really well, and I know how to take care of myself really well when I'm working with someone because of the Alexander technique, because
And
because it continually, like, I said, it's a path to presence. It is a process that I continue to go through to be present with myself.
right, and the whole idea of looking after yourself is very deeply ingrained in Alexander technique teacher training.
Yes,
It's kind of, I don't know whether it's the essence of it, but it's certainly an extremely important aspect that your ability to help somebody is in large part determined by your ability to look after yourself as you're working with them.
that's right.
And it sounds like that looking after yourself aspect, as you say, fits in perfectly with the Gestalt therapy. You
Yes,
don't get drawn into someone's, as you said, someone's drama. You can help them best by keeping track of yourself as
that's
you're
right.
working with them. And it's interesting. I mean, that's very analogous to, for example, I don't know whether you've had occasion to work with, say, massage therapists or physical therapists, people who themselves have to use their hands,
Yes,
um, and often, uh, if they're not careful, get so drawn into the work that they harm themselves. I mean,
that's right.
massage therapists are forever having wrist and hand injuries and so on. Physical therapists as well. They're often lifting people's limbs or whatever, and both those professions have a pretty high burnout rate. And the Alexander technique is a really good way of showing them how to look after themselves and work with less physical effort often.
That's
It
right.
sounds like it's a kind of an interesting analogy to Gestalt therapy. I
Yes,
mean, in quite a different field, but the same taking care of yourself, thereby making you a better whatever Gestalt therapist or
yeah.
yeah. Now, how about the Laban movement work, which I have to say I don't know very much about. I know it comes out of dance, and it's quite a specific set of movements. How does that fit in with what you do, and how does the Alexander technique help you with that?
Well, I did the Laban training before I did the Alexander work, but because I did the Laban training, it's not so much about being able to do the movement. And it's interesting because a lot of therapists and actors and dancers were taking the course. And I think those are the people that are mostly drawn to that work because it enables us to really see other people and to see these specifics. Movement and what happens in the body can be so ephemeral and so difficult to describe. We feel something when we're with another person, but the Laban work gives us a real beautiful language, a very detailed language to be able to describe it. And when we can describe it, then it becomes clear to us what it is. And then with that, I can use, in my hands and in my dialogue with another person and through my touch, through the Alexander work, I have more access to help them because I think that I'm able to see things a little bit more clearly and in more detail than I would have if I didn't have that training.
Hmm. And I assume that the Laban work is used for purposes other than just dance training. Is that
Oh,
correct?
oh yeah. A lot of psychotherapists actually study the Laban work because so much we're somatic beings. I mean, everything that we are and every quality that we have and every feeling that we feel is registered in our bodies. And so being able to see someone and to distinguish what's going on and then to be able to help someone else distinguish what's going on within themselves uh, creates the opportunity for change and learning. And that's exactly the Alexander technique. These are all, I'm just curious about the same thing, how to help another person find more peace and ease with themselves. The Alexander technique helps tremendously. The Laban work helps with that, and the Gestalt work. Uh, and yeah.
So when someone comes to you, um, do they typically have in mind you working with them with one of these methods, and then you might introduce others, or do they come because they know you work with movement and in general terms, and they may not know even what these three are, and do you then just use the one that seems most appropriate at the moment? How do you decide how to begin a session with somebody? I guess that to me would be a really interesting question, because for a regular Alexander teacher, typically, you have the students sit in the chair and maybe you ask them what they notice about how they're sitting and help them a little bit or something along those lines. It sounds like your work is a little different, may have a different approach in that respect.
I'm get a variety of people that want the Alexander work brings in probably the most
Hmm.
people. And then people who know of the Gestalt work and want to go a little deeper in their own process. No one comes to me to work through the Laban stuff. No one seems to really know what that is.
Hmm.
But that informs my work so much. But when I meet with someone, I almost exactly like beginning an Alexander lesson. We sit together and instead of going right into their body, and asking them what do they notice, what do they observe, we have a dialogue. What's going on for them? What do they notice? What's important in their life? What would they like to work with?
Hmm.
Where are they? That it's just a little bit instead of just the body work, really it's a little bit more about the person's life.
So that is significantly different, I think, from the way most traditional Alexander teachers might work. And we tend to say things like, if you have emotional issues or life issues, that's probably something for someone else to help you with because we're
Yes.
not trained in that. What we can help you with is how you organize your body, your physical mechanism to do things, to sit, stand, move around, how you react to stimuli on a physical level. Um, we tend, I think, as a group to stay away from some of the things that you're quite happy to delve into. Is that a reasonable statement?
Yes. Yeah. And that. I love that. I love going deeper because I know there's more to it.
Hmm.
And that intrigues me. And that always has intrigued me. And that in some ways is why I carried through with this work. I didn't feel, I like the emotional work. I liked when something came up to explore it. I was very curious, but I wasn't skilled at all. So I really didn't, I did exactly what you said. And, things would come up. I could suggest a therapist, but I was always intrigued. I
Hmm.
wanted to go deeper if someone was willing. And I find that a lot of people are really curious.
To see the connection between
Yes,
their
to go.
emotional work and physical manifestations in their selves, that sort of thing, or just
Yes, yeah.
yeah.
And I'm not a Gestalt therapist. I'm not a trained therapist. I'm a practitioner. I would have to go and get a master's degree in counseling or psychotherapy, and I'm not going to do that. I don't consider myself a therapist. I consider myself a teacher because of the Alexander work. I really feel that I keep to that aspect, or I keep to that principle that we're working together. It's a learning situation. And so I don't really go into very deep or traumatic, or I don't know that I would want to take it too deep, but I don't keep it just to the physical. I like to, like, there are very interesting things, just a question or two away, that help someone to open up understanding for themselves that that is very satisfying to me, that I think creates a change more deeply, more quickly, and more lastingly.
Could you give our listeners an example of something along those lines? From what I hear you saying is you're not gonna take on someone with really serious like post-traumatic stress issues or that kind of thing, right? You
Exactly.
would you would suggest they go somewhere else. But what would be an example of that sort of gentle questioning that you just referred to that might bring out things that would be really interesting to work with, maybe even in an Alexander way?
Yeah. Mostly, well, I'll give you an example of a recent um, session, or a
Hmm.
recent thing that came up in a session where someone actually was lying on the table, and they were speaking in one way with their right side, and then they would speak about something with their left side. And and the right side had a very different quality than the left side. It was this or that. I could do this or I could do that. So I asked them, to embody that, to feel that, and what comes up when they feel this side versus that side, and maybe to exaggerate that. And then to see what, I mean, this is a long session. I'm saying this in,
Hmm.
2 minutes, but this
Right.
was a lot of work.
Hmm.
But where was the middle? And how is it possible? Can one side weave into the other side? Can the other side weave in, to the opposite side? And the person had a real strong epiphany about how they have separated, and they had tension on one side of their neck. That's what started it. They had neck pain. And so we worked with that. But it was really a situation about, being very black and white. It's either this or that. And they couldn't find the middle ground in the situation. And then they started to feel it in themselves. And that changed a lot for them.
So
And
you would get them to literally to notice what's going on the left side of their body and then on the right side. Is that what you're saying?
yes.
And then and that's the sort of and then perhaps bring their attention to the center of their body and that
Yes, and
something along those lines.
exactly. And then also with the right side, how
Mm-hmm.
does it feel different from the left side?
Mm-hmm.
How would
Mm-hmm.
you embody, can you exaggerate it? And when you're exaggerating it, would there be any, anything that would come out? Could you say anything from that side of your body? What's that sound like? Or what's the color like? Or whatever. And then the other side of the body, what would that be like? And then they begin to notice they are very different. Oh, where do you feel that? How, and then it's always what I have found. It's a beautiful thing with the Alexander technique to work and to help someone feel better and move up and out of a pattern. Where I like to work is that what I find very beneficial is to explore the pattern and the reasons for the pattern, and then to allow the person to choose, to work out of it or in any way they want. I mean, I can guide them, of course, but to explore their journey through the pattern. So does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So what I'm getting is that if that person had gone to a typical Alexander teacher, the teacher might well have noticed some of the same physical manifestations that you did, and might help them with their hands or with their words to help release the side that seemed tighter, but
Yes.
probably would not have gone that next step and try to see what was an emotional underlying aspect of that. I think
Yeah.
most Alexander teachers would not feel terribly comfortable going that route. They would probably stay more on the physical side of things,
Right. That's
what
right.
they saw as being physical. Of course, F. Matthias Alexander himself was very clear that physical and mental were two sides of the same coin, but
That's right.
nonetheless, most teachers would stay more on the physical end of things. So you then have the option. I mean, you could have gone that route with that client, right? But you had that choice that you could go in and explore in a slightly different way than most Alexander teachers would.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah.
I can see that. I think most teachers, I mean, for me, I can appreciate that, but it's probably not where I personally would want to go, just because of my nature. But I could certainly see that as being a really interesting use of Alexander technology, if you like, combining
Yeah.
it with that. Um, Melody, is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to mention before we come to an end?
No, well, actually, just one thing. I
Hmm.
think since this is an Alexander podcast,
Hmm.
to say quite sincerely, the Alexander work has informed every aspect of my life, my work, my teaching, my relationships. It really has. As I said in the beginning, it's a path to presence. It really is an amazingly simple and profound work or method that informs everything. And I would never be able to do the kind of work that I do if I didn't have that foundation. And I'd never have the courage, probably. I wouldn't
Hmm.
have the courage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree with what you just said about the technique. It is an amazingly powerful process if you choose to use it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's very counterintuitive that it's so simple and it provides such profound change.
Yeah. Well, my main teacher, a woman named Marjorie Barstow, used to say it's incredibly simple, even too simple for most people to wrap their minds around. But she never said it was easy.
Yeah.
She
Right.
was very careful because one of the problems with its simplicity is that it is so simple that we humans seem to have an ability to complicate things whenever possible, and that's something that comes up all the time in Alexander teaching. So,
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think this would be a great place to bring our conversation to a close. My guest has been Melody Shaper, an Alexander Technique teacher in the Philadelphia area. She lives near Valley Forge, which I guess is a bit north of Philadelphia. If anything that we have talked about intrigues you, we'll put a link to her website by the interview, and you can if you're in the Philadelphia area, you can contact her. If you're intrigued by the Alexander Technique, we will put a link to a site where you can learn more about that and find a teacher wherever you happen to be. Melody, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Robert. It was an honor. Thank you.